since we don't have time to prepare anything actually on the technical side. Kevin, welcome to the program. I introduced you to our viewers. Basically, I told them about what kind of troublemaker you have been lately.
You could call me that.
Because I know O'Reilly actually had some way or another actually threatened your life. I know you had taken some steps about that. But let's go ahead and start. We'll talk about O'Reilly a little bit later. Let's go ahead and introduce who Kevin Barrett is and what is the 9/11 truth that I think you belong to an organization called Scholars 9/11 Truth.
That's right. I'm a member of Scholars for 9/11 Truth, and that's st911.org.
Okay. And you're also the national coordinator for Muslim Jewish Christian Alliance for 9/11. What is that group is all about?
Well, I'm a co-founder of the Muslim Jewish Christian Alliance for 9/11 Truth. That's MUJCA.com. And I helped found that group about 2 years ago after I witnessed the atrocities in Fallujah on Al Jazeera. I'm sure many of your viewers and listeners have seen some of this footage of U.S. troops barging into a mosque and executing an innocent old man.
They've seen it all. They've seen it all.
That's right. And so I was, I've been pretty upset about what's been going on since 9/11, and that incident and the Fallujah massacre that was launched on Laylatul Qadr, along with a lot of other things, got me so mad. I just said I've got to do something productive here to try to stop this religious hatred that 9/11 whipped up. And David Griffin, the author of The New Pearl Harbor, is a well-known theologian, Christian theologian, who has been leading the charge for 9/11 Truth. And David encouraged me to found this group. And Faz Khan of New York City, he's been an imam at a couple of different mosques in New York, and has been working for 9/11 Truth since before I have, became the co-founder. So we have a couple of Muslims who founded this.
Kevin, let's get into the subject of exactly what we want to talk about, because we have a lot to talk about.
Goodbye.
Tell me about this controversy. You have been on national news. Now, you do teach Islamic Study or Introduction to Islam, and you are planning on teaching the conspiracy theory about 9/11. Tell me about that, and tell me why are you in, I guess, under pressure for wanting to teach that?
Well, actually, it's kind of a mistake, this idea that I'm teaching, quote-unquote, conspiracy theories, or that I'm even teaching my own views. That's not the case. I'm teaching an Introduction to Islam course, and only 1 week out of the semester we'll be looking at the so-called War on Terror, and we'll be taking a critical perspective on it. We will be reading materials that support the dominant interpretation of the War on Terror and 9/11, and we'll also look at 2 essays that question it. And one of those essays is by Nafiz Ahmed, who's a British scholar who has done a lot of work showing that quite a lot of this so-called extremist Islamic terrorism is actually being coordinated by Western intelligence agencies, including presumably 9/11. And another is by Enver Masood of the Wisdom Fund of Washington, D.C. And those 2 essays are really the only things in the whole course that would support the alternative explanation of what happened on 9/11.
Okay, so what is the alternative explanation?
Well, basically the 9/11 Commission report is a 571-page lie, as David Griffin puts it, as he says there's not a word of truth in it. We know for beyond a reasonable doubt that the 3 World Trade Center buildings in New York were demolished with explosives. We know that this was covered up.
Okay, so hold on. So are you going to teach that to your students?
No, actually, because I don't believe the World Trade Center demolition even figures in to either of these 2 essays that we're reading. And so normally that probably wouldn't even come up. 9/11 would be about 20% of 1 week of the
Tell me, you've been on O'Reilly, you've been on Sean Hannity, you've been on a lot of programs. Because I've heard those, that was their argument, that you want to teach the conspiracy theory. So what is it that you're going to teach?
As I said, I'm teaching a 1 week segment out of 15 weeks on the so-called War on Terror. And during that week, we will be reading essays that support the official story of 9/11, and we'll also be reading 2 essays that critique it and that would support, the other explanation that it was probably an inside job. And just the fact that I'm assigning those essays has driven everybody crazy.
The others that you're going to be studying is the theory that it was an inside job.
That's right, and that is, of course, the theory that I personally subscribe to.
Okay. Now, if we are, what's so wrong with you teaching that? Is that against the law?
Well, I would hope not. Last I heard, we still had a constitution, and in there was something called freedom of speech. There's also something called academic freedom that says that, people teaching at universities are allowed to pursue their own research wherever it leads, that they're allowed to have their own opinions and voice those opinions outside of class, and as long as what they're doing is professional in the classroom and defensible before their peers, they should be okay. And of course, that's what the university says about me.
What is wrong with all universities actually studying all these theories? Because I'm looking at this 9/11 commission report. Number one, the commission was 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and they spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and they
they didn't.
They came up with this study that really did not answer any of the questions of why it happened or who did it.
I believe they only spent a total of about $12 million, which was a tiny fraction of what was spent investigating Bill Clinton's sex life. They didn't spend hardly any money, and there was very little investigation. Basically, the 9/11 Commission report is a spy novel by Philip Zelikow.
How much we spend on Clinton
They spent $60 million or more on investigating Clinton's sex life, and they spent, I believe, a total of about $12 million on 9/11.
Okay, so we lost over 2,500 people and destroyed a whole country and killed over 100,000 people, and we only spent 12 million to investigate it. That's pretty good.
And that was after 400 days of resisting any investigation.
Yeah. Now, if we want to do an investigation now, do you think we have any grounds to? Do we have any evidence left?
There's overwhelming evidence that 9/11 was an inside job.
No. If we want to do an investigation, do we have any evidence left, like actual evidence that we can put our hands on, or all of it has been cleaned out?
Oh, no. We have lots of evidence. We have videotapes. We have audio tapes. We have samples of the steel. Professor Stephen Jones, a physicist from Brigham Young University, has recently tested steel samples from the World Trade Center and found residues of thermate, which is the explosive that he has proven must have brought down the World Trade Center.
Okay. Now, in your state, one of the, congressman or senator, Nass, I believe, he's really after you very bad. He wants you out. What is going on there? How far have they been able to really hurt you at your university?
Nass is an extremely unpopular politician. He's the least popular politician in the state, at least here in Madison, and it's said that even people in his party don't respect him very much. So being attacked by him was really a stroke of luck for me in a way. And he's managed to collect 61 signatures, all but one of them from his fellow Republicans, urging the university to fire me. But he's also been unable to collect 74 signatures, and in fact the university has basically told him to take a hike, and that they're not going to be rolling back academic freedom at the University of Wisconsin.
Okay, before we go to the break, the people in Madison actually supported you overwhelmingly, right?
It looks that way, from the letters to the editor, the phone calls to radio shows, and even the polls. We had a poll that showed that 90% of the respondents thought I should keep my job, and 60% thought I was raising good questions about 9/11.
Okay, so if 60% thinks you are raising good questions, then people out there, the majority of the American people out there, don't buy the government story on 9/11. Kevin, hang in there for me. We will be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are speaking with Dr. Kevin Barrett of the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Kevin, Dr. Ray Griffin made a statement, and he said that it is already possible to know beyond a reasonable doubt one very important thing: the destruction of the World Trade Center was an inside job orchestrated by terrorists within our own government. I know you believe that because you wrote about it. Explain that to our viewers and tell me why it was an inside job and what they wanted to accomplish by destroying the World Trade Center.
Well, we have all sorts of evidence that the World Trade Center was brought down with explosives. That includes the fact that the steel in those buildings was certified to not lose any strength up to 2,000 degrees for 6 hours, way more than what it could possibly have experienced from those brief fires. Molten metal was all over the place in the ruins, and you can't melt steel with jet fuel fires. So, and I could go on and on like this. So the evidence is overwhelming that these 3 buildings were taken down with explosives. Now, why did they do it?
Exactly.
That's your question.
Yes.
I think that it was a covert operation that was designed to trigger the war that will not end in our lifetime against the countries of the Middle East. And we're certainly seeing that now, aren't we?
So what we are seeing in Lebanon today was planned and related to 9/11?
Yes, I think so. I think that Ray McGovern,
explain that for our viewers.
Ray McGovern is the former CIA briefer to the president. He's briefed several presidents for the CIA, and he says that the motivation for this was OIL, oil, Israel, and logistics. He says that the vast majority of the world's oil reserves happen to be under areas where Muslims live, and so that's why they had to blame the Muslims for 9/11, and that Israel is facing an uphill battle in terms of trying to remain an expansionist, Zionist apartheid state, and with the massive American war in the Middle East to destroy Israel's enemies would be useful for Israel. And finally, logistics means establishing American bases around the Persian Gulf and in Central Asia, where most of the world's remaining energy reserves are located.
Okay. So what we're seeing, the destruction of Lebanon, actually is within the plan that was orchestrated to destroy Iraq and then move on to the rest of those countries in the Middle East and neutralize them. So
yeah,
are we seeing? So is this war America's war in Lebanon?
Well, yeah. See, the thing is that Israel couldn't be doing these crazy things that it's been doing since 9/11 without America's permission. And the reason that the U.S. is giving Israel permission to do these horrible things is because we had this, traumatizing psychological event on 9/11, and the American people have been brainwashed into blaming the Muslims for it.
Okay. So I guess this explains why Israel and the United States are the only 2 countries. Of course, I don't count Britain, because Britain will go, Blair will do whatever Bush tells him to do. Is that why we're seeing only the United States, Israel, and Britain against the whole world as far as the ceasefire? Because the whole world wanted a ceasefire immediately.
Well, that's right. It was actually the intelligence services of the United States, Israel, and Britain that pulled off the 9/11 attacks, according to Michael Rupert, who's one of the foremost researchers on the topic. And I don't think it's any coincidence that those 3 nations are the only ones who want to keep the slaughter going in Lebanon.
Okay. Now, Doctor, the whole thing we've been talking about, I read that scenario in the A Clean Break, which is the policy paper that was written by Richard Perrell and Douglas Feith and others. Now, in that paper, they were talking about that the peace in the Middle East will be not on the formula of land for peace, but actually on the formula of peace for peace. So are they going to destroy and kill as many people in the Middle East until the people in the Middle East say, okay, give us peace, we will give you peace, and no more land for peace offer?
Yeah, that's exactly their strategy. And it's interesting that Richard Perrell and Douglas Feith did sign that document, that Clean Break document. And guess what? Sibel Edmonds, the FBI whistleblower, has said that she heard FBI intercepts, and she helped translate them, that showed that Richard Perrell and Douglas Feith arranged the financing for the 9/11 attacks. She's actually let that information be known, even though she's under a gag order from the Attorney General.
Okay. Now, tell me, as Americans, we are looking at this and saying, well, if the government was involved in this, and if the government is actually planning all this, then there must be an interest for us in doing all that. Can you tell me what the national interest of the United States in destroying the Middle East?
Well, frankly, I don't think it's in America's interest to destroy the Middle East. I think it would be a lot easier to just buy the oil rather than going over there and stealing it. But, personally, I think that there's an open question about to what extent that Zionism, and in particular this fanatical Likud version of Zionism, is really the motivator behind 9/11 and this crazy war that will not end in our lifetimes that was based on 9/11. Ray McGovern, this former CIA president's briefer, seems to think that Zionism is a major part of the motivation for 9/11. And I think the question is still open, to what extent it's all about fighting for what's left of the world's oil as peak oil arrives and the oil becomes very expensive, and to what extent it's about trying to allow for a greater Israel, between the Nile and the Euphrates. It's hard to know the exact motivation, but those seem to be two pretty obvious ones.
Okay. Doctor, stay with me. We're going to go to the phones, and Jihad, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, you're on.
Okay, hello. First of all, I would like to thank you for this program that you are having. I think it's wonderful that you're giving us a chance to speak our minds.
Thank you.
And my comment is that what Israel, well, I don't want to say Israel, because I don't really consider it as a country, me being Palestinian. What the Israelis are doing to the Lebanese refugees and the Palestinians is no surprise. They have been doing this for the past 60 years, or even, God knows, even more. The massacre of Qana is only one of God knows how many massacres that the Israelis have done. 64 people were killed, among them all children. There's been massacres of Shabra Shatal, Deir Yassin, and I can go even more. What is upsetting is that even though innocent children were murdered throughout the first Intifada and the second Intifada, and with all these massacres that Israel has been committing, that the Israelis still have been portrayed as victims of terror in the United States. It's so frustrating to see that your own people are murdered cold blood, and yet in this country, with the propaganda of CNN and Fox News, that they are portrayed as victims of terror. It's really frustrating. And another thing I would like to say is that what the Israelis are doing is unjust. It's not an act of humanity. It's an act of barbarian savages.
Okay.
I wish, honestly, I wish all the, Arabs, I don't want to say Muslims, because Palestine and Lebanon is made of Christians and Muslims that live together for years with peace. And what the Israelis are trying to do is try to make war between Christian and Muslims in that region.
Okay.
What I wish is that Arabs all over the world can unite, and we can put a stop to this killing.
Okay.
Killing of innocent children, killing of innocent women and men.
Okay.
And people such as Ariel Sharon, people such as Walmart, and I don't want to name other names, but people that you and everyone else should know that who I'm referring to. Be put to justice. Be punished for the crimes they have been committing.
Thank you, Jihad. Your message is very clear. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's go to Freedom on 1. Go ahead, Freedom.
Oh, yes, Dr. Barrett. I called Dr. Tillawi about a month ago and told him that O'Reilly was on the warpath for you to be fired from your job at the university. But let me ask you a question. Wouldn't you have a much stronger case now, seeing that Vanity Fair has just come out with an article and some tapes, if you go to their website, about what happened at the control towers during 9/11. Also, Alex Jones held a symposium, and it was shown on C-SPAN 4 times this weekend about 9/11 strategies. They had Professor Stephen Jones on, as you know. And also, there was a survey taken today from one of the newspapers, and about 1/3 of the American people believe that it was an inside job. So don't you feel, Mr. Barrett, that you are now vindicated in what you're planning on teaching your students? And thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know if I've been completely vindicated by everybody yet, certainly not by Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity. But, yeah, I think you're right. it's been an incredible last couple of weeks or last couple of months. That Scholars Conference was just broadcast on C-SPAN. That's st911.org, Scholars for 9/11 Truth. You can go there and see their work. That was amazing. Then we, as you said, we've had a number of other things, including a great article in Vanity Fair about the makers of Loose Change. If you haven't seen Loose Change yet, go to Loose Change videos at Google Video. And then we also, you didn't mention this, but just a couple of days ago, we have this report in the Washington Post that the 9/11 Commission is now saying that they recommended that NORAD, that is the U.S. military command, be prosecuted criminally for lying to them. And that's just amazing. And I think what we're seeing there is some CYA, cover your you-know-what. The 9/11 Commission knows that they produced a sham and a cover-up, and that they could end up on the gallows right next to Cheney and Pearl and Wolfowitz and Faith. And so they're trying to backpedal and get some distance between themselves and that sham cover-up that they produced.
Now, Doctor, isn't it against the law to, take the country to a war, a secret war, so to speak? Isn't that against the Constitution, against the law?
Well, it's beyond against the Constitution. It's high treason. The Constitution says that the Congress has the power to declare war. What we had here was it wasn't even a question of the president and vice president setting up a war. They did it by attacking their own country. That's an act of high treason and mass murder, and I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see the principals in this administration hanged for treason within the next couple of years.
Okay. Let's go back to the phones with Ramsey. Go ahead, Ramsey.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yes, sir. I just have a question for your guest. Can you please tell me about the role of the Israeli intelligence, the Mossad, and what information does he know about what they played on 9/11? And also another question is, have you, Dr. Barrett, been harassed or attacked by any of the Jewish organizations for doing your work? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, I haven't really been harassed by Jewish organizations. As I said, my group is the Muslim Jewish Christian Alliance for 9/11 Truth. That's MUJCA.com. And we've reached out to people, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, whatever, anybody who wants to see the three great monotheisms sit down together and have some dialogue about the facts and meaning of 9/11. And we're hoping that that can lead to peace. And we do have some Jewish supporters, quite a number of them. And in fact, there's a book that I edited that is coming out in September called 9/11 in the American Empire. Christians, Jews, and Muslims speak out. And we have some wonderful contributions, even from some Jewish Americans who are pretty much on our side on the 9/11 thing. Rabbi Michael Lerner, who's the leading progressive Jew in America right now, and who is, unfortunately, from my perspective, pro-Zionist, has given us a wonderful essay in which he says that we need to get ready for when the perpetrators of 9/11 are hanged for treason. So it's not like all the Jews are against us, and I think it's very helpful, to avoid blaming whole groups of people for things that are done by small numbers of people. But I do think that you're right, that there is some evidence that there was Zionist involvement in 9/11. Larry Silverstein, the guy who bought the World Trade Center 6 weeks before it came down, and who overinsured it for terrorism, and then asked for $7 billion on its 6-week investment and collected more than $2 billion, and then confessed that he demolished World Trade Center 7 with explosives. And you can see his confession, and you can see the demolition. Just go on the internet. This guy, and he was never even mentioned in the 9/11 report. Building 7 was never even mentioned in the 9/11 report. Well, guess what? Larry Silverstein is an arch-Zionist and a weekly telephone buddy of Netanyahu. Now, to me, that says something. Likewise, the fact that Pearl and Faith financed the 9/11 attacks, according to FBI whistleblower Sibel Edmonds, that says something to me. But we shouldn't go out and blame all the Jews of the world for this. It was a crime. It was committed by a very small number of people, and we need to arrest and prosecute those people.
Okay. Stay with me, Doctor. We will be right back. We're going to take a break. back, ladies and gentlemen. We are speaking with Dr. Kevin Barrett of the University of Wisconsin at Madison. We're going to go back to the phones, but before I put the next caller on, as soon as I put you on, ask the questions. I don't want long statements. So go ahead, Eugene, ask your question.
I was supposed to Dr. Barrett.
Ask the question.
I was just wondering, him and you also have your doctorate, right?
Ask your question, Eugene.
What do you have your doctorate in?
Last chance. Ask your question.
I'm answering.
Go ahead, Larry. Ask your question.
Yes, I have a question. Dr. Tillawi, you mentioned earlier that the Jews were targeting civilians, old ladies, and children, and you said it was against
You have a question?
Yes, you said it was against the Muslim religion. My question to you is,
No. Larry, hold on.
Are you an idiot?
Okay, yeah. You know who's the idiot? You are the idiot, and I'll tell you why. What I said is a bunch of rabbis, and you can go and see it. They have declared that at a time of war, it's okay to kill women and children. I didn't invent that. That is a standing doctrine. It was 2 weeks ago. You can go and check it out. Islam and Christianity, they are against killing civilians at a time of war even. So, Dr. Kevin, did you hear about this, the rabbi doctrine, the rabbis?
No, I didn't hear about that, but I still think that even in this case, if one group of rabbis says that, we shouldn't imagine that every Jewish person agrees with that, because, I have some Jewish friends. Some of them are anti-Zionist, some of them are pro-Zionist, and I'll tell you, not one of my Jewish friends is in favor of killing civilians.
I understand that, but what we're saying is this group of rabbis and Israel, I mean, apparently for it to be so important that it reached news media, with them saying that. So, I mean, we do have to talk about it, because, if this was a Muslim, it doesn't matter who he is. If he said this, it will be all over the news. But because these were rabbis, it did not even make it to the mainstream media.
And that's a very good point. I agree. We need to talk about these things. I've spoken out many times and gotten in trouble by saying that we need to investigate Zionist influence on the mainstream American media. And if there are Zionists and they're Jewish and they're people who are in charge in the media, we need to know about that, because we need to know where our information is coming from. And likewise, I agree that we need to know if a bunch of rabbis are saying this. That should be news. And I'm sick of this biased coverage that we're getting in the American media. So I guess I tend to agree with you there, Dr. Tillawi.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go to the phones, I believe, with Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
No, it's Eugene.
Okay, Eugene. Goodbye, Eugene. Okay. Like I told you, people, when I put you on, ask the question. I don't want someone to read a statement. Ask a question. I have the doctor here, and he's ready to answer any question. As you know, I always say I want those who oppose our opinions to call, because that will be our only chance to actually teach you something. Why do I want people who agree with me to call this program? But if you call here, be civil, and I will put you on, and you can ask anything you want. Dr. Barrett, what's going on? You don't believe that Osama bin Laden even exists, huh?
Well, no, of course he exists. But I'm afraid he may have died a long time ago, because, after 9/11, he did 3 different interviews with Pakistani journalists in which he denied any involvement in 9/11. And in one of those interviews, he actually deplored the attacks and said that it was against Islam to slaughter all those civilians. And then, in December of 2001, we got that so-called confession video. But if you look closely at that guy, it doesn't look that much like bin Laden. He weighs about 50 pounds more, and his face, it has a very broader and flatter nose. He looks totally different, really. And in fact, at Scholars for 9/11 Truth, that's st911.org, you can read a paper in which you'll see that facial metrics analysis proves that this guy who supposedly confessed is not bin Laden. And America's leading bin Laden expert is a Professor Bruce Lawrence of Duke University, and he says that the recent bin Laden tapes are fake, and that the real bin Laden has probably been dead for quite some time, and I tend to agree with him.
I tend to agree with you too, because we did that on this show when those tapes came out, and we put the old pictures and the new pictures, and you can tell, if you look at it, definitely it is not the same guy. Let's go to Richard on 2. Go ahead, Richard.
Yes, doctor. The question that I have is I'm wondering, how would we be able to get this information? And the reason why I ask this is because I know Dick Cheney and Paul Wolfowitz and all of those guys are all over at NSA, CIA, scrubbing all the records. And is it going to be something like 25 years down the road, we'll read about it, like the Iran-Contra scandal, and we'll say, oh, well, that happened 25 years ago, I mean, because you're saying that we should take them to trial for treason, but will we have the ability as the American people? And that's my question.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I completely heard the question, but the question was basically, is this one of these things that we'll have to wait 25 years to learn?
Well, he was wondering, if we are to study this 25 years from now, are we going to have any evidence left in the records, or are they going to be all deleted and scratched out and nothing to even look at back at?
Oh, no, the evidence is overwhelming, and anybody can see it now, and it's mostly been very well, there's all sorts of well-preserved evidence, evidence in the form of testimony, in the form of reports, in mainstream publications, evidence in the form of videotape, audio tape, photographs, residues of steel from the World Trade Center. They tried to get rid of a lot of this evidence, but they didn't succeed. I think that we have way more than enough evidence right now to indict Dick Cheney for treason and mass murder and bring all these guys to trial. So I don't think we have to wait 25 years. I think we already have everything we need now, and the public is waking up very fast. We now have somewhere between 30 and 40+% of the people on our side, and that's it's going up exponentially. So I really think that this administration is going to be taken out of the White House in handcuffs before the end of its term.
Okay, very good. Let's go to line 1 with Bob. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Sean, I was wondering, I've been seeing a lot of commercials on TV about the Christian and Jewish Alliance asking money to send over there to help the poor Jews. More on a personal level, like a state level. When we were under siege by these 2 hurricanes, did Israel send us any money over here to help us out?
When we were under siege, where?
From these 2 hurricanes we had.
Oh, okay.
Did Israel help us? Another question, another answer I'd like to say or something is that even if we could find somebody guilty, there is such thing as a presidential pardon, so he'll give everybody a blanket pardon and himself too. So. Yeah,
that's true. Kevin, that's a good question. We might find Giuliani the president, and Giuliani was involved in the planning and actually prosecution of, not prosecution, actually in actually doing, he was there, and if Giuliani becomes president, he's going to pardon everybody.
Oh, yeah, Giuliani is one of the top suspects in 9/11. He is on the record as stating that he knew the towers were going to collapse before they did, and if he did, he must be psychic, because nobody else in their right mind could have expected such a result from these plane crashes. Never before in history have these steel-framed buildings ever collapsed from things like, plane crashes and fires, and of course if they did, they would topple. So Giuliani apparently was informed before the fact that these buildings were going to be demolished with explosives, and the 23rd floor of World Trade Center Building 7 was the command post from which the attacks were apparently arranged, and Giuliani, that was the New York mayor's quarters, where the mayor was supposed to oversee any disaster that hit New York City, and Giuliani was apparently involved in this FEMA coming to New York, setting up shop on the 23rd floor of WTC 7. There was a massive FEMA presence that came into New York before 9/11, ostensibly for a terror drill that was supposed to happen on September 12th. And, yeah, there's all sorts of evidence fingering Giuliani as being an active participant in the 9/11 attacks. Okay. And so, yeah, if he became president, that would be a disaster. He needs to be up there on the scaffold with Cheney and Wolfowitz and Pearl and Rumsfeld and those guys.
Very good. Let's go to Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, HC, how you doing?
Fine.
Well, good. I have a comment for Mr. Barrett, Dr. Barrett. I think you touched on something that was very important, is that a little group of a few people doesn't represent a whole. And I think that we need to stress that this isn't, if you point out the people that are, doing what they're doing because they happen to be in the position to do what they do, human nature, what I'm saying, we're all wicked. I mean, that's a very important point, that I don't think it's any group of people. I think whoever's in power, what I mean, the golden rule, as far as for, what I'm saying? So we need to stress that. It's not this one certain group. But I'm very distressed, and I really agree with you that they ought to, construct a big old gallows, and there's a bunch of people that need to be walked down the plank. regardless of what they are. It's not what you are, it's who you are.
Okay.
This world.
Thank you, Chris. Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think that from an Islamic perspective, the Quran teaches us that we each are, face to face with God as individuals, and that some people make the right decisions and some people don't, and that there are people from different groups and all the different tribes and religions were put here to compete in goodness. And some of us are more successful than others at competing in goodness.
Doctor, we're going to catch one more call before it's time to go. Go ahead, Joel.
Yes, hello, sir. Dr. Barrett, did you read the article on Rense.com by Michael Rivero on 9/22/2001? He wrote an article in there 11 days after 9/11, and in that article he wrote a story about stolen...
Very quick, Joel. Very quick.
About stolen incubators that angered America in the support of Desert Storm, which turned out to be a complete fiction created by a company called Hill and Colton, a public relations firm.
Okay.
A firm.
Joel, we're going to have to go. Kevin, very quick. We have half a minute left.
Yes, that's true. A public relations firm was hired and coached the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter to pretend that she was a nurse in a Kuwaiti hospital who had witnessed Iraqi troops ripping babies from their incubators and throwing them on the floor. And she gave tearful testimony to Congress, and the U.S. Congress bought it, and that's what got us into Desert Storm, was this big lie cooked up by the George H.W. Bush administration.
Dr. Barrett, I only have time to say thank you, sir, for coming on the program. Hopefully we'll have you here back here soon.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tillawi. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Good night.
Hi, I'm Jill Howell-Dugas, and I'm with Stellar Place. I'm the fund developer for our center, and we're a nonprofit organization that houses two programs. One is the Children's Advocacy Center, and the other is the Sexual Abuse Response Center. I'll first talk about the Children's Advocacy Center. We have counseling services that we offer, but first of all, we get referrals from law enforcement or child protection, and they will call our center to schedule an interview, a forensic interview, where we will interview a child that has allegedly stated that they've been abused. Sexual abuse and severely physically abused is what we do interviews for. They'll call and set up an interview. They'll come into our facility, and we offer a very safe, friendly, child-oriented building that they can come in and talk about this traumatic event that's happened to them. Law enforcement is there, child protection is there when needed. We have a separate room for them to observe the interview, and the child is interviewed and asked questions by one person. And before our center was there, they were asked several questions by several different people. And this way it narrows that down where they can tell their story one time. We can try to prevent them from having to go to court and talk about what's happened to them, and we'll try to provide the taped interview for the court so the child doesn't have to relive that experience again by telling their story in the courtroom. It's not always guaranteed, but we do try to provide that service for the child. And once the child has been interviewed at our center, we offer counseling services to children ages 5 to 17. And we do have sessions offered for 8 to 10 weeks, and we do mostly prevention education, and if the child does need more services, we'll recommend further counseling and provide a referral list when, if it's necessary. And then our other agency is the Sexual Abuse Response Center.
evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. In the second hour, ladies and gentlemen, we will be speaking with an interesting gentleman who used to be part of our government, and he will tell us, this man is an insider, he knows exactly how it works, he knows exactly what's going on, and he's going to teach us, as he taught so many officers in our army when he was the chairman of the Department of International Studies at the National War College, and also he was Deputy Director of State Department of Office of Counterterrorism. Terrel Arnold, also author and co-author, editor of 5 books on terrorism and violence in society. Most recent, published in December 2005, called A World Less Safe, published by Book Surge, and you can get it at Amazon. I believe we do have Terry with us. Terry, are you with us?
Yes, good evening, Hesham.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for coming on the program. Terry, while you are at the National War College, I'm sure you have, a lot of our officers, and probably now they are high-ranking officers, pass through that college. Have we taught them anything about international, what's happening in the world?
Well, the sad thing about the global situation right at the moment, so far as our present government is concerned, is yes, those officers who go through the war colleges are regularly taught a great deal about international relations, about the very complex situations that exist in many regions of the world. But the unfortunate situation in Washington right now is those people specifically are not being listened to.
Okay, tell me, explain that to me. So we have some of our officers who know what's going on and saying, whoa, stop, this is not what we need to do, and no one's listening to them?
I think that started at the top with Colin Powell.
Okay. Why do you think we're not listening to our military officers at a time of war? I mean, they're the experts. They're the ones who should know better than someone who was never in any combat situation or even military situation. Why aren't we listening to our generals?
Well, I think the short answer to that question is that by and large, what the I think only moderately conservative military officers of our establishment might be saying is inconsistent with the agenda of the neoconservatives at the top.
Okay. Terry, tell me what's going on in the world now. Why are we in the mess that we are in now?
We have some people who believe the way to deal with complex international problems is to use military force. They either have forgotten or they never knew that these situations can be dealt with to the extent that in a short period they can be dealt with through negotiation, discussion, compromise, and in some cases just waiting for things to pass. Waiting for things to pass, for example, in 1959, I was on duty at the State Department's Office of Intelligence and Research the morning Fidel Castro started his move out of Oriente Province and Batista got on an airplane and left Cuba. We're about to see a change of administration in Cuba of as yet unknown dimensions. Fidel has handed power over to his somewhat younger brother, Raul, who was also part of that revolution. And he, more than anything else for the short run, would do nothing radically different from what his elder brother did. But already some people in the United States are trying to figure out how to mount a revolution down there.
Okay. Now, you were the Deputy Director of State Department Office of Counterterrorism. Maybe you'll probably be the best one to explain to me what the heck is terrorism.
Well, terrorism is a different thing to many different people. Unfortunately, the term has been corrupted to the point where one's enemies, who are not constituted members of a military force, can very readily be called terrorists, and we see that as the dominant terminology of the Middle East right now. Hezbollah is both a political party and a functioning insurgency inside Lebanon. It's called terrorist group as a matter of convenience in the United States and Canada, but much of the rest of the world regards them as a political party. And to be sure, they are doing battle with the Israelis right now. In Palestine, Hamas is considered a terrorist group. Hamas, by ordinarily civil rules, would be considered a legitimate insurgency fighting against an occupying army. The terminology is very loose, is what I'm saying to you, and I'm afraid the old comment that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter has been corrupted to the point where even that is virtually meaningless these days.
Okay, so, I mean, does that justify just by, because, you know, the American public apparently is accepting the pictures that are coming out of Lebanon with killing many children and hundreds of children and women, because we put that label on Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, and our news media is saying that the Israelis are targeting Hezbollah positions, but all we see are dying are women and children. But the American public is accepting that, because they say, anytime they mention Hezbollah, they say the terrorist group Hezbollah. How can, I mean, we want to help the American people because they are ultimately responsible for every child that dies, because we are actually paying for that war. So how can we help the average American understand that once you put that label on somebody, terrorist, that does not mean that they are actually terrorists, and that does not mean that it's a license to kill?
Well, I think Americans have to become familiar with the numbers in this situation. In Lebanon, probably the best estimate that I have seen suggests that Hezbollah may have 15,000 members in all stages of availability to do battle with the Israelis. The population of Lebanon is 4 million people. At the best statistical estimate I have found, maybe 20% of them are even politically affiliated with Hezbollah. So that what the Israelis are doing is carrying out a collective punishment against upward, of 3.5 million people. And it is a collective punishment against people who are not even associated with the so-called terrorist group that they allege they do battle with. Americans have to understand that this is their gross part of the situation in Lebanon that's going on right now. Not just a few, but tens of thousands and maybe even hundreds of thousands of completely innocent people are being pushed around by the Israeli army on these battlefields.
Okay. Mr. Arnold, stay with me. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are speaking with Terrel Arnold. Terrel, let's go to the phones and get a couple of callers. As a matter of fact, let's see. Go ahead, Eugene, on 2. Go ahead.
Hey, Mr. Tillawi, all I want to do is ask a question.
Go ahead.
All right. You say that you want to talk to people that have an opposing point of view.
Eugene, you told me you want to ask a question, so go ahead and ask a question.
All right. What do you have your doctorate in?
Okay. Mr. Arnold.
Yes.
You have written so many articles about the subject, and now I'm about different subject when it comes to the Middle East. Is what's going on in the Middle East now? Is it a plan that that has been written way back, like for instance back in 1996? Is what we are seeing is the implementation of a clean break, the policy that was written by Richard Pearl and Douglas Faith?
And Wormser and others.
Exactly, and others. So, I mean, is this what we're seeing, the implementation of that plan?
I don't think so. I think the argument certainly has been made by a number of people that is the case, and the argumentation, of course, was updated by the Project for the New American Century in the program that they wrote for the Defense Department. But you know, the principal thing to keep in mind about such plans as those is the famous comment of Winston Churchill in the middle of World War II. Plans essentially are useless, but planning is essential. And there may be variations around all of the themes in those plans as they were made back in the 90s. But we have a different group of people running the agenda in Washington with somewhat different motives, and they're responding to live situations in each of those places, and plans are changing all the time. You have watched the complicated maneuvering around the subject of how to deal with Iran. Iran, from its own point of view, has taken a very sensible position. It has a right under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to process nuclear material up to fuel levels of purity. The United States is insisting that it doesn't have that right. Various people, including the UN, seem to be going along with the theory that Iran represents a special case under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This is an argument that can go on as long as the parties are willing to pursue it. We don't have a specific plan for dealing with Iran, is what it amounts to. And, you know, I know a number of people within the framework of the Wormser Faith Pearl group would argue that one of our highest priorities is to attack Iran. I think that's among the stupidest things that I've heard in a fairly long life. Iran can be dealt with quite successfully at a level of negotiation and compromise. We just haven't chosen to do that. I think the same thing applies to the problems that we may have with Syria. Those problems can be dealt with through discussion. We have an embassy there. We have a government that talks to people that even speaks English. So there are numerous ways to deal with the problems that beset us in that part of the world, including the arrangements that we need to make in order to assure continuous fuel supplies from that region. There's an enormous lack of imagination around such plans as Clean Break and the Project for a New American Century.
Now, Terrell, you were in the State Department, you were as a foreign counselor, I think. You have worked in a lot of foreign missions for the United States.
Well, I worked in 5.
In 5, okay, well that's plenty. Why are we willing to lose? And you know, if you have been outside the country, you know people loved, even those countries that they were so-called adversaries to us, the people there, they loved the United States. They loved the people of the United States. We built this great reputation among almost the whole world, almost, But most people in the world, even those governments that were opposing to us, the people loved us. Now the whole world hates us. Is it worth it, whatever we are doing, is it worth it to lose this reputation, this 200-year building that took to build this reputation? Is it worth it?
I don't think it is, and I don't think anyone with any wit would say that it's worth it. What is actually happening, however, is somewhat different, I think, from what you're suggesting. I think many people in the world still have a high regard for the American people. They object to American policies, and they object to specific American actions in the Middle East and elsewhere. But they still have a great regard for the American people.
Have you taken any overseas trips lately?
Not lately, no.
Okay.
But I talk to people abroad all the time on the internet.
Okay. You might want to, if you do, you will see a huge difference in the way Americans are treated, especially in Europe, from all countries, especially in Europe. There have been a shift in treatment of Americans across the world, as a matter of fact.
Well, I'm not surprised by that, Hesham.
Okay.
I think you could expect it.
Okay. Now, what is it that we are, I mean, tell me, we know that the neocons, we talk about them all the time, the people who wrote the plan, even though you said they're probably not working on the plan, but even though things on the ground are very much the same, and their plan was take out Saddam, divide the country, neutralize Syria. We see everything is happening according to that plan, but
well, loosely you can say that.
Okay.
Happening according to the plan, no, I wouldn't buy that.
Okay. Now, in that plan, they also were saying that this process of land for peace is not good for Israel. What we need to create is a situation where that peace will be achieved through peace for peace formula instead of land for peace. So they want to create this huge massacre in the Middle East, so countries like Lebanon and the Palestinians and the Syrians will say, hey, just give us peace and take the land. Is this what we're going to see?
It's certainly the way it looks from the White House. That's the way it seems to look, because President Bush is so closely allied with Israeli leadership in the way he seems to think about these things. Below the very top of the government in Washington, I think you find much more sensible positions being held and looking for an opportunity to be pursued. What we need is a change of top leadership in order to get a change of attitudes around these issues, because most people do not want us to go down the path we are now going down.
Now, Terry, President Bush, he did say a few years back the two-state solution, and he said he was committed to the two-state solutions. Now,
he said that.
I'm sorry?
He said that. That's correct.
Yes. Now, but at the same time, and you wrote an article about this back in 2004, when the Congress of the United States on June 23rd, they voted 407 to 9 actually to basically give Israel the right to annex parts of the West Bank. And you wrote an article about this. Now, how could, and also at that same time, the letter of April 14, 2004 that Bush gave to Ariel Sharon, which basically given him approval for Israel to annex part, or for its plans for the West Bank and Gaza. Now, on the one hand, he promised the Arabs and the Palestinians that he's committed to two-state solutions, but on the other hand, he's giving a letter of basically take whatever you want. How can the Arabs or anyone in the world trust this man in the White House?
Well, I think you've answered your own question.
So are we saying that the people of the world should not trust America because he represents America?
No, I think what you have to say is that this man has been pursuing his own particular agenda and the agenda of the group around him, and he's been hewing very close to a totally pro-Israeli position in a situation where the United States ought to be an honest broker in trying to find a balanced solution to that problem.
Do you
think the balanced solution is known? It's been known for years, and he is choosing not to pursue it. That, I would say, is not an overall American solution, but it's certainly a solution that's being pursued by this administration, and I think it's most unfortunate that that's the case.
Do you think we should
find a way out of it?
Do you think we should, in order for us to really find a just peace in the Middle East, do you think we should take America out of the formula?
No, I think we need a change of leadership. America has been pursuing this mostly properly for decades.
Well, okay.
What we have is an aberration about 5 years long.
Okay. Now, we need a change of leadership. Now, who are we going to get next? It's either going to be Giuliani probably, or McCain, or what's her name, Clinton.
Well, if you know that already, you know a lot more than I do. I don't think we know anyway who is going to
Does it really matter? I mean, you've been in government. Does it really matter who's going to come? I mean, whoever is pulling these people's strings is going to pull the other strings. And how are we going to, I mean, that's not a solution. We're going to get very much the same policy on Israel. It has been consistent all throughout probably the last 50 years.
Well, the big difference now is that more people know the score. That doesn't mean that those people are, by that token, empowered. But a lot more people know what's been going on in the Middle East than did, say, 5 years ago. There are so many more people who are speaking out about it. There are so many more Israelis who are speaking out about it. So the climate of opinion is changing. It's changing slowly, and it may not be changing fast enough to preserve the elements of a sensible two-state solution over there. That remains to be seen. But the climate is changing.
Very good. Let's go to the phones with Freedom on line 1. Go ahead, Freedom.
Yes, I would like Mr. Arnold to answer this from his heart and from his gut. And please don't be diplomatic, Mr. Arnold. This is about our media. It's very rare that we have a show like Dr. Tillawi had where we can actually call up and discuss serious issues. Now, I have listened to Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, Mark Levine, all these right-wing talk show hosts, and they all seem to be saying the same thing now, that Hezbollah probably attacked Connor themselves and killed all those people. That's what they're saying. Now, I want to ask you a question. Whenever Dick Cheney appears any place, he always appears with the American Enterprise Institute or something like that, these right-wing think tanks. Now, I want to ask you a question. Is there a right-wing conspiracy to control our media and thereby control the United States people? Or is it a conspiracy among AIPAC in order to control not only what we see on the media, but also what we think? And thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, I would say what's going on is hardly a conspiracy. What we have is a group in charge of American policy who seem to think that way. So it's not a conspiracy. It's standing right out there doing its thing. And recent writings of people like Mearsheimer and Walt, who have talked about the Israeli lobby, have made it perfectly clear that many of these people are more closely devoted to the needs of the State of Israel than they are to the needs of the United States and its basic interests. Getting that out on the table and getting it looked at and discussed is the first step toward getting it fixed. That doesn't mean we're there, but it means we're moving in the right direction.
So now, the media question that he had, are they programming the people? I mean, are the people even paying attention that they are being programmed to think one way?
Some of them may be, some of them may not. The assumption of the Rush Limbaughs of the world is if they talk long enough, even if they tell absolute lies, some people will believe them. And that, unfortunately, is a true statement.
Okay. Let's go back to the phones with Chris. Go ahead, Chris. Chris? All right. Chris, call us back. We had big-time feedback there. What's going on in Lebanon now? Oh, I'll tell you what. They're telling me we need to take a break. So just hang in there with me. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are speaking with Terrel Arnold. Terry, you have wrote an article, I think it was your last article, which, by the way, Terry publishes. He's a regular on rents.com. You can read a lot of his articles on the website. You wrote an article when Blair visited George Bush last week, and what they have agreed about, and you said they agreed on a simplistic and video game-like solution to the conflict in Lebanon. What exactly are you talking about there?
Well, the principal problem I had with it was it was an alleged solution devoted entirely to the problem of Israel and Hezbollah, and didn't even look over the shoulder at the fundamental core problem of Palestine. And that, unfortunately, is the way the situation seems to be continuing to go. The focus is on the war in Lebanon, and at the same time, many people, including you, I'm sure, know that there is an active war going in Gaza and in parts of the West Bank. And that war is designed to further diminish, if not destroy, the will of the Palestinian people to resist what's happening to them. That isn't going to work. It hasn't worked for 60 years. But I was really, truly befuddled and depressed by the fact that Blair and Bush did not talk about the core problem in looking at what's going on in Lebanon.
What do you think? I mean, do you think eventually Hezbollah is going to give up? The Israelis going to occupy Lebanon and probably train some, have sectarian fights there like they have started in Iraq, and then set up a government similar to what is going on in Iraq now? How do you see this game that is being played now ending in the near future? I'm talking about the war now with Lebanon. How do you see it ending?
Well, you should look at the article I posted on the Rent site this afternoon that says the IDF should look at the numbers. The IDF has something like 10,000 troops scattered around southern Lebanon in an area of some 500 square miles. That represents the space between the Israel-Lebanon border and the Litani River and the mountains. And that's not a very large force when you think about it. It may be very well equipped. But Hezbollah, operating as an insurgent group, as a guerrilla warfare operation, has, by the best estimate I've seen, maybe 15,000 fighters in various stages of readiness to do battle. And it's going to be a tough assignment to find all of those people and dispose of them however they might dispose of them. So that I don't think for a moment that an Israeli win in Lebanon is a slam dunk. I think it's going to be, if it occurs at all, it's going to be enormously costly in Israeli blood and treasure.
So, you're not seeing the scenario that's taking place in Iraq with the American army there actually take place in Lebanon, where it's under occupation, but we have some kind of resistance as we see with the insurgency in Iraq?
It could be one of the ways it would go. I think it would depend on the political stamina of the Israelis on this, and I'm not at all sure that they have the political stamina for another extended Lebanese occupation. That's a big question that's on the table in Israeli discussion right now. If you read the stuff I'm reading coming out of there, and it's a tough issue for Olmert to decide just to what extent it's in his political interest to stand and fight, and when he should decide he's done all he can do on this round and he ought to back off. I don't know how sensible he's going to be on the matter, but my reading is that taking and holding Lebanon is going to be tough.
Well, because, I mean, the way it could happen, where after this whole initial shock actually settles down, they might go in and actually try, the Lebanese with all their different groups, they are now united against Israel. But later
85%, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm afraid that later on, as the war goes on, that they might be able, which the Israelis are very good at, actually dividing the people, and they might go in like they did in 1982 and install a government that was imposed on Lebanon, and basically create the civil war in Lebanon as it was before. Because one thing they will try to do probably is to get, sectarian wars going on, and probably even divide that small country.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that the Lebanese have endured the extended civil war, 15 years out of the past 20, for example. But there are much earlier instances of Lebanese civil war. The factions there have always been a bit flaky from time to time, it seems to me. But the Israelis have to invest enormously in blood and treasure in order to take that situation on and control it in the way you're talking about. And I just don't see, as of this moment, the political stamina in Tel Aviv to pull that off. I could be wrong. I could be wrong, because there are some people, and I'm among them, who think that one of the goals of this enterprise is taking the territory from the Litani River south. That little zone has a very magical property called water, and the Israeli situation is increasingly starved for it. So that's one scenario, and I don't rule out the possibility that this is, as some say, a strictly territorial ambition on the part of the Israeli to take that land and make it part of Israel. That's something to be watched for. It's something the international community has to attend to.
What international community? Israel killed 4 of the UN observers there. The Security Council didn't do anything. They were shocked.
They haven't done anything yet, anyway.
The statement that came from them that they were shocked, and then a couple of days after that, they kind of massacre, and they said they were deeply saddened. They did not even condemn Israel. So is the UN dead?
Well, it's having a big struggle for sure. I don't think it's dead, but it is not getting an awful lot of support from such as the United States at this stage, and that's very important to its overall health. We need it. We need it badly, and we need it more than we've ever needed it before. And how we get it restored to a proper position of power and respect should be a major assignment for our government, as it is for every other, but it's not at this moment.
Okay, so basically the Lebanese should not look at the United Nations for any help. And this force that they are talking about...
I wouldn't put it quite that sharply. They should look to the United Nations for all the help they can ask it for and get. And it will provide quite a bit. What it will not provide
is protection.
That's
okay.
Correct.
I mean, why do we need the United Nations if the only thing it can provide is some blankets and some meals and some medicine? We can get that from anywhere. If the United Nations that was created, by the way, to protect the people and protect the weak from the strong, then why do we need it? I think, and I don't know why they call it United Nations. I think we need to have another organization which is not composed of governments but composed of people's organizations.
Well, that's one way to look at it. The United Nations never received a mandate to do warfare aggressively against communities. It always had to do this as a joint venture with particular countries that were willing to carry the ball. I would love to see a proper, fully empowered army in blue that could represent the broad interests of the people worldwide and stand up for humanitarian actions and social justice. We don't have that. We don't have that. we have to look to sensible governments to get together and recognize they need to do that, and we're not close enough to that kind of a decision yet for me to be comfortable.
Okay.
But they are working on it.
Let's go back to the phones with Richard on one. Go ahead, Richard. Richard, go ahead. Richard?
Another feedback problem.
Richard. Okay, the problem, he's listening on the computer and there's a little bit of delay. So let's go to Bob. Go ahead, Bob.
Iraq.
Bob, go ahead.
Or Iran, or through Syria. Is that pretty much imminent, or is there some way we're going to be able to stop that?
Okay, thank you. Terrell, the war against Syria and Iran, is that imminent?
I don't think so. I think it's clear that there are some people who would like to see that occur. But there are a lot of voices out there who oppose that strenuously, and it would be enormously difficult for us, the United States, to mount that kind of a campaign because we simply don't have the forces in being to do it. We could only do it as a standoff bombing operation, and that's absurd. Because standoff bombing, as the Israelis have demonstrated in Lebanon, hasn't done much to diminish the horsepower of Hezbollah, even though it's made a mess of Lebanon. And that would be our prospect in Iran, but Iran is a much, much bigger problem than anything else we might have tackled. You're looking at 80 million people, you're looking at considerable wealth, you're looking at a substantial military organization that has real capabilities, including throw power with missiles. And it would just be a tough assignment and a ridiculous engagement because we don't need to do that. And most people see that we don't need to do that in order to work with Iran on mutual problems.
Okay. Let's go to Ramsey on two. Go ahead, Ramsey.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yes, sir. I just want to say that, so if you look at the United Nations record, Israel opposed over 70 resolutions condemning Israel, and it's the United States, Israel, the Marshall Islands, and some other islands who oppose a two-state solution. And so the U.S. doesn't support the two-state solution. What Bush was saying was just propaganda. And sir, I think the problem is going to be solved from inside the United States, because as long as the United States is under control of the Jewish lobby, and that lobby has to be defeated because it's an ethnic racket, as you know what I'm saying. Like I don't think the Security Council members or the General Assembly going to do anything because they can't. So the problem is going to be solved from the inside.
Okay. All right. Thank you. What do you think, Terrell?
I'm not sure precisely where his question is focused.
He was basically saying that the United Nations had issued resolutions for the two-state formula, and Israel was opposing to it, and also that nothing's going to change unless we change it from the inside of the United States. I'm not sure what he meant by the inside. I guess the people changing things, because he thinks AIPAC is basically what's controlling things.
Well, clearly nothing is going to change significantly unless there is a general international agreement on the idea of a two-state solution, and an honest two-state solution that goes back basically to the 1967 Green Line boundaries. And, the Israelis complain mightily about the fact that they have no partner for negotiation and no plan for negotiation. But for years, the Arab League has had on the table a plan. The Saudis, the Crown Prince Abdullah, have put forward a plan. Hamas and the prisoners have put forward a plan that is basically a return to the Green Line with perhaps minor variations, and the acceptance of a two-state solution. And even Hamas has said we would recognize Israel in the circumstance that Israel recognizes our right. That hasn't happened so far. I think there's a growing recognition of the need for this, and there needs to be changes in leadership attitude in the United States to get it back on the track that it was on before. But that track itself needs a good deal more thrust than it's had in many a year.
Now, Terrell, do you know any country in the Middle East that really wants or can destroy Israel? Any country in the Middle East that wants or can destroy Israel?
I don't think that has been the game for a long time. There's been some strong language. Ahmadinejad has used strong language. I think that's more rhetorical than it is practical.
So this garbage that you hear of on the airwaves, that poor little Israel, the Holocaust survivors, are sandwiched between 22 Arab countries who wants to push them into the sea, and this is what's on the airwaves. So you think that's nothing but garbage?
Well, I think that's the Israeli story for publication in the United States, and I think you can find it mostly in the barnyard with a shovel.
Okay.
There is no truth to it.
Okay. Is Israel defending itself in this war?
No, Israel is expanding its borders, I think, is the name of the game. What it's trying to do is rid itself of people who have every right to oppose what it's trying to do to them.
Now, how do you see, Israel have destroyed these little towns in South Lebanon. They completely destroyed some of these towns, which tells you that the people who were in those towns will never can even go back to those towns. That's
the intent, as I understand it.
Okay. Okay, I'll tell you what.
That unfortunately is the intent.
Okay, so this thing about Hezbollah capturing two Israeli soldiers, that's nonsense. I mean, Israel is not doing this because Hezbollah took two soldiers.
No, they're not. Israel has many Lebanese prisoners. They've played the prisoner exchange game before. They use this as a pretext for doing what they already planned to do. There's no question about that.
Very good. Let's go to Bob on two. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, does your guest think that Israel will take it nuclear, or under what circumstances do you think Israel will take it up to the nuclear stage?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Terrell?
I don't see a circumstance where they would think of going nuclear, because the consequences of that are pretty horrendous. And the use of a nuclear weapon against a non-nuclear state poses its own problems. One of the things that has worried me about some of the threats coming out of the hardliners in Washington against the Iranians is that they've talked about using a tactical nuclear weapon as a bunker buster to get at some of the buried sites they may have. This is all a very risky neighborhood, and there are lots of people who are working to see that doesn't come about. And there are many governments who are strongly opposed to it, even other governments that have nuclear weapons, because nobody knows what happens once that lid is taken off the use of nuclear weapons.
Now, Israel and actually the United States too have used depleted uranium against the Palestinians and the Iraqis.
Well, they've used it widely in Iraq, no question about it, more in the Gulf War II than they did in the first one. But they used it there, and they've used it to a certain extent in Kosovo. The depleted uranium has the virtue, as a military man would put it, of enhancing the mass of projectiles and makes better tank killers out of them. But it also spreads radioactive debris all over the place. And we're the only people doing that, we and the Israelis.
Now, there are some reports coming out of Lebanon that whatever bomb that hit the 3-story building in Cana and killed all these women and children, that this bomb, the effect of this bomb was it kills, but also it freezes the bodies in whatever position that those bodies were in. And we've seen the pictures where actually they did look like these bodies were frozen. Do you have any idea what weapon could have that effect?
I've seen the question, and I don't have an answer to it. What it looked to me like was they used something akin to a set of cluster bombs on the apartment building in Cana. I don't know that, but I've heard the stories you've heard, and I have no explanation for them.
Okay, and also they have used some bombs with chemical effect on it, where the whole body was basically burnt, like the body of those dead. It was like burnt.
The argument being made is that they've been using white phosphorus as a weapon against civilians, which is illegal, but nonetheless that's the argument that's being made, and the evidence for that is being investigated by a number of people. It certainly looks as if that's a true statement.
Okay. Now, the time that we have left, we as the United States of America, the great country that we used to be, and I think it was a French, I don't know, leader or who said it, but he said America is great as long as its people are great. What happened? Why America is silenced about what's going on in the world? We see all these dead children and we're not doing anything. Are we like we have been immune because of the videos and the movies that we see, that seeing killings, it does not faze us anymore? Or where are the great people in America, Terrell?
Well, it's a fair question. I think the principal answer to your question is, as I've said earlier on, we do have an enormous leadership problem. And traditionally, what people abroad have seen is the manifestation of America through the behavior of its leadership. And what they are seeing now and interpreting as a basic American value is the behavior of a leadership that is at odds with our core values. And I think more and more people are seeing this. More and more people are beginning to object to it. Fewer and fewer people support what is happening in Iraq. I think if you approach people deliberately on the street and ask them, you will find that they do not support what is happening in Lebanon. It isn't that we are, systematically as Americans on the wrong side of these issues. We're not communicating very well what we feel and think about it, and we're not directing our leadership to fix these problems, and our leadership is not listening to us mostly anyway right now. But the core problem is at the top. The core problem is at the top.
There is a bill in Congress now by, I think, Representative Kucinich, asking for immediate ceasefire, and I think he has like 14...
co-sponsors.
I'm sorry?
Co-sponsors.
Yes. And do you think there's any chance that this bill would even make it to the floor to be voted on?
Well, the chances are not terribly good because of the basic position that Congress has taken on this conflict. I think there would have to be some really outrageous development that would make it happen quickly.
Well, do you think if everybody listening to us now picks up the phone and calls or sends an email to his representative, do you think it might have a chance?
I think it would improve the chances greatly. In fact, that's the way we're supposed to operate, and there are a number of people working on that. Like, a number of peace groups are working that way, and a number of fairly strong political groups are working that way.
Well,
so do it.
I'll tell you what, I'm asking everyone listening to this program, throughout the nation and actually throughout the world. Well, throughout the world they can't really do anything, but throughout the nation, to pick up the phone, call your congressman, and tell them to vote yes to the resolution that Kucinich is going to introduce, and also to co-sponsor that resolution with Kucinich and others.
And get it done. Get it done.
Yes, get it done through email, through the phone. They are all listed. Terry, we have 3 minutes left. What are your hopes for the future?
Well, my hopes for the future are that we will actually speed up some processes that I see occurring. You know, there are days on which I respond quite positively to millimeters of progress on some of these things.